Did you, before you came to Russia, did you have some sort of a mythological image of Russia? Like,
Of course, everybody in the West does.
and what part in this image played Russian cinema, Russian literature, this sort of thing?
Well, maybe I can sum it up by celebrating, I suppose, Eisenstein. For many people now, it's a long gone situation with all sorts of connotations which aren't always positive. But I think there are very, very few filmmakers who really could be considered to be giants of cultural activity, people that you can put up alongside the names of Beethoven and Michelangelo. So precious few people that can do that in the cinema, but Eisenstein, for me, without embarrassment, is one of those names.
Необходим ли вообще этот реальный образ страны, или этого мифа достаточно для режиссера для того, чтобы делать фильм в стране? Насколько вообще необходима реальность, чтобы снимать фильм в стране?
When you film something in the country, do you need the realistic knowledge of this country, or the mythological image that you had is enough to make a film?
One of the many, many devices in the film is to try and reproduce the character of Franz Kafka. And Kafka, without ever having gone to America, writes a very, very successful novel simply called America without having been there.
Нет, в России вообще русских женщин, которые снял. Почему нужно снять именно русских женщин? В чем, так сказать, эта особенность этих русских женщин? Ну, понятно, жена и вопросы мне нужны другому. В чем особенность этих русских женщин и вообще вот эти актрисы, которые он снимал? Чем его руководствовался при выборе этих трех актрис?
Четырех.
Четырех.
Why did you need Russian actresses in particular? What made you choose them out of a lot of other nations? And what made these four special that you chose them out of a bigger number of actresses?
Well, I can give you an interesting answer, or I can give you a boring answer. Maybe I'll try and give you both. The second one really is the process of casting and auditioning is the same all over the world. If you are an auteur filmmaker who's responsible for the original ideas, you often have very fixed ideas of how those fictions should be working. So you spend a lot of time seeing a lot of people to see how your fictions can associate themselves with the facts of the people that you interview. There are, I suppose, in some cases, new or slightly different ways which I like to operate, because sometimes I might approach an actor or an actress, say, why don't you consider this part? But they are so different and so much more interesting than what I've invented that in a sense we end up reinventing the character to fit them. But the other part of the question, the secondary title of this product is A Fictive History of Uranium. So it deals with the last 60 years of history of the 20th century. And if you exclude Russia from that history, you are being extremely stupid. So I think we need very much to make here a project which represents all sorts of cultural ideas from the known West, but also with all those antagonisms and anxieties and associations that would be responsible for the détente, the Cold War, most of the history, in fact, of the end of the 20th century.
Больше выражается национальный тип выбранных женщин или мужчин, кто является носителем национального типа.
I see. Who carries the national prototype, the national image of the country, men or women?
Are you referring to Russia?
To any country.
I suppose, you know, that's one of those trick questions which whatever way you answer, you'll probably get it wrong. I would in some senses try to skirt around that particular sort of inquiry and suggest necessarily there has to be a representation from both sexes.
Когда вы встречаете русскую женщину где-нибудь в другой стране, вы понимаете, что это русская женщина?
When you meet a Russian woman in some other country, do you realize that she's Russian? Can you recognize a Russian woman?
Well, I suppose in the last 10 years, but we all know this is getting better and better and better, the particular accent will always probably identify. And as of yet, because of all the history of the last 20 years, there aren't, I suppose, huge numbers of good English-speaking Russian actors and actresses around. And we have attempted, in a sense, to hit this product head-on by deliberately organizing our projects using Russian actors and actresses, but allowing them to speak in Russian and developing all sorts of tropes and paradigms to overcome that, not simply by dubbing or subtitling, but by the use indeed of translators like Vasily here.
Последний вопрос. Последний вопрос. Предполагаете ли вы снимать актрис, которых вы снимали во второй части «Чемодан» в следующих своих фильмах?
And the last question: do you suppose you'll be using the actresses you cast in the suitcases of Tall Slipper in your new works, new films?
There are all sorts of plans, because now that I begin to maybe associate with production here and with casting, I have a whole series of projects that I would like to realize which have nothing to do with Tolstoy Suitcase at all. We have a grand project called Bergensfeld, which is all about necrophilia, and I can find all sorts of dark, deep, romantic subject matter and associations here in Russia where it might be the ideal place to play such a film.
Everybody are delighted with your film, and we all want to convey our love to you and our respect, and well, you made a beautiful job.
Well, I thank you for that, but we must remember there were a number of people who walked out of the film. I quite like the fact that the film is provocative enough to upset people, because I think there always ought to be an element of danger and provocation in any primary artwork.